We used to use old barbershop chairs to tattoo out off of, and this is a kiddie seat. The rubber handles stayed on the porcelain arms of the chair, and this, where the clock is, was a cushion. So I made a clock out of it. Okay, this time we're going to talk about some of the people I met through my years of tattooing. And when I was a kid in Coney Island, it was still legal back then, before they outlawed the city back in '66. Stanley and Walter Moskowitz, and I'm talking to one of their sons right now, and naturally Huck Spalding, Crazy Eddie, who is now Philadelphia Eddie, Jack Dracula. I remember the first time meeting him, he had an older hearse with Batman emblems on the door with a coffin in the back. And he walked around, and when he drove the car, he had a big black cape with the high neck part of it, you know, just like Dracula. He was a little weird cat. And I tell you a story about one of my father's other kids from the second litter. He's a little slow, and so on a carnival lot, a truck ran over, and good thing it was muddy when he was in his stroller, and he squished his head into the mud. So it didn't hurt him, but I'm sure there was some brain damage there. Another time, two trucks backed up to empty some of the stock, the carnival stock, the toys, from one truck to the other, and his head got in the way of the two trucks. Got smashed up a little bit. And the last time, and I was there for this one, me and my old man and Barney John was visiting Jack Dracula in Jersey, where he had a shop, and someone threw a brick through the window. It hit Barney John right in the head. So these days he is a little slower than most. The Sailor Eddie, Sailor Bill, there's a couple of Sailor Bills, there's a couple of Sailor Eddies actually too. Boy, there's so many of them.
Ronnie D.
Ronnie D, here's a funny one. So I just broke into tattooing with my old man. We come into my grandmother, back to Coney Island for the winter months. Carnival season was over, and I got a job tattooing, and I didn't have nowhere to do it. My grandmother didn't want no strangers in the house, so I had a '62 Thunderbird, and it had a console in the middle, like a roll-top desk, and all I had was a machine and a tube that my old man put together for me at the end of that first season with him, and he put together one for my brother Frog. One was a liner, one was a shader, so I soldered up some needles, and I'm going to work on this guy. So the only place I had was inside this car. So I had no power box and no clip cord or nothing, so I ran wires to my machine. So I had to run full time, pulled out the hot wire off the cigarette lighter, and I put up all these little flashlight bulbs in their sockets, the more bulbs they turned on, the slower the machine ran. And I did that first tattoo, which was my first tattoo not working for my old man. And Coney Island Freddy was in the end of Coney Island. It was called Seagate. It was a gated community. He found out somebody was using the name Coney Island Freddy, and I grew up with his name, and I met him when I was real young. Him and my father did a lot together, and he sent Ronnie D down to fetch me. And Ronnie D was kind of like Freddy's goon squad at the time before he got into tattooing. And so he brought me to Freddy's house. We tattooed out of his house because New York was illegal. And excuse me. And so they want to jack me up, and I told Freddie that I knew who he was, and I'd never use that name, but my name is Fred, and if someone called me Coney Island Freddy, it ain't coming from me. You got my word, it'll never come from me. I know Coney Island Freddy was a legend back in them days. And he was famous for doing an old Christ head, and this would be way before washout and fancy tattooing. And when he did the black shading, so the eyes looked like someone dotted his eyes. And he must have did thousands of them things. And back in them days, that was like a $50 tattoo. But it was good size, so it would be a $400 tattoo today. Crazy Eddie, we went to visit him one year. He was going to finance a shop for me and the old man to open up. And so we went down to Washington. There was Johnny Walker, was down around the corner from the Greyhound station, and Carol Nightingale was across from the bus station. They both of the stores, Carol Nightingale's was boarded up with plywood, said tattooing or whatever on it, stars, and he had a camera set up, and you had to drop $10 in a little bank slot in the door to come and look. Well, before the door opened up with an electric button, you go behind a cage, and so he wouldn't let both of us in. My old man knew him, for years, so we finally figured out who we were. He was old by then, and he let us in, and the neighborhood's bad and all that. We went around the corner later on to see Johnny Walker. Well, he had a bike accident. He had a little brain damage. So we go to his shop, and he's behind a cage, just like a prison cell. And so I asked him, he was more friendly than Carol Nightingale was, what happened? He says, see them bullet holes above my door? Because he was in a basement shop. He says, that's how many times I had to shoot my way out of here. So when he said he had to go load up, I told him he was going to fill up his inks. He was filling up a 357. Just the old timers were who they were. They're the grandfathers of tattooing. Anybody who gets into tattooing and don't do the history about tattooing, find out who these people are, what they invented, how they brought machines about, and the different pigments about, they shouldn't be in the tattoo business. You got to know the past before you go to the future in any subject. So me and Ronnie became friends anyhow, from Coney Island Freddie's days. And Freddie wound up kind of half-ass retiring down in South Florida. And Ronnie opened up in PA. And I do owe him a phone call. If he ever gets to see this, I will call you someday when I remember. And I don't know. Now, Philadelphia Eddie, who was in the Navy at the same time as my old man and Hawk. And we were friends with Tony the Pirate. He was a character in his own. Years ago, if you worked out at a house, we used to call them bootleggers. And now there's a lot of good people that work out at a house that either they're old and retired, or they just don't want the hassles of having a shop. They pick and choose their customers that way. You don't have to have neighborhood kids and gangs come and whatever you don't want to deal with, I guess. I always believe open shops make more money than someone bootlegging.
You know Pete Poulos too, right?
Peter Papolis, he was another one. That sucks. He had a little itty-bitty shop, about 14 feet wide. It went down right to a point across the street in Long Island from the Hempstead Turnpike. There was a Hempstead Raceway or something. And he did a snake on my wrist with it tied up in a knot. My father had one, so I wanted one, and Peter Papolis did. He was one of the first guys to open up multiple shops. It's called Peter Tattoo, Peter Tattoo. And they had a couple of them in Long Island where he was originally from, and then he went out to Denver. And unfortunately, he was a muscle-bound, good-looking guy. He had a lot of chicks with him. Married man, too, at one time. And I know the stories about him dying was they tied him up in a chair and blew his hands off. So whether that's true or not, I don't know, but that was the rumor. One of the girls that worked for him, Marguerite, kept the shops going. And, somewhere in the 80s, Mr. Tramp from Fort Worth was up visiting. He did a couple skulls up above my back piece, and I had to go to Long Island the next week to finish him up because customers came in and I wanted to make sure he made cash while he was visiting. So I met Marguerite for the first time down there, and there was a guy, Larry, I think it was Pete's partner, if I'm not mistaken. I don't know his last name, but they continued the Peter Tattoo thing. And the last time I saw Peter, it was in Denver, Colorado on Broadway. And he just made it real big in the business real fast to open up all his shops. He was in magazines first came out. He was probably in every single one of them. on all the tattoo rags. Real nice guy, very polite. Definitely was a decent artist, more than most. Jackie Armstrong, very old timer. He promotes himself, or he did, he's passed, as the grandfather of tattooing. He said he was weaned on a tattoo machine in his crib. Is a story he tells everybody. And I always liked, because he was down south by, I forget what fort was there, military base. So if you went through there during the 15th or the 1st, you got military pay. And you sat up for 2-3 days, because Jackie wasn't a great tattoo artist at all. So if anybody came through, go ahead, sit down, make some money, and you gave him 50% of the money. 50% was normal back then. I know all these new guys are starting out with people a lot cheaper, and you got to build up to your 50%, I guess, however they're working it. I used to tattoo over people's houses. Buzzard's going to have a corn roast. Do I want to come over and tattoo? And I used to tell him if it was a Sunday or Monday, my days off, so I didn't lose out on my shop. And you have 10 people with a $50 deposit. If it rains, they don't show up, I keep their 50. If not, it naturally gets deducted. And today the kids call it a tattoo party. Years ago, we're tattooing over Buzzard's house or John's house or whoever. So things are changing.
You know Cliff Raven?
Cliff Raven, Chicago. Tattoo artist well past his time. You know, when he got older, he started, got away from tattooing. He started engraving guns by hand. And that's done with a V chisel and mallets. And you couldn't tell it wasn't done by a laser machine. That's how good he was at it. And he did some bike parts for different people on the rocker boxes back in the old shovelhead days. And the guy was he was a true artist. He had always had the bright colors, even when colors weren't that good back in the day. He could cover up anything. He covered up my oldest brother's back and side, and with all the circus stuff, and naked girls tickling each other with feathers on trapeze artists. He's in a lot of different tattoo books. He was a master beyond master as far as the tattoo business. Lyle Tuttle, we talked a little bit about him before, ahead of his time. He promoted tattoos, he did not sell equipment, so he just promoted the idea of getting tattoos. He was pretty much covered himself, and he tattooed Peter Fonda, Janis Joplin, which got in the newspaper because of who they were, and so that promoted it. Right about that time, that era, Huck Spalding opened up Spalding and Rogers and sold to the public. And that's what started this big tattoo boom, as I call it today. Some kids today, they're kick-ass artists, and some, I wouldn't let them pop my balloon with a needle. It's just the way it is, you know. People that don't want to apprentice, they want to do it on their own. There was a girl in Rochester years ago, Angelina, kick-ass artist. She went to a 2-year commercial art course in college. Her work was excellent, but it all faded out. She was scared to hurt the people. I never did this, but I offered to apprentice her. Usually most apprentices approach me. That's how good she was, but her husband was a dick, so that never happened. And she got out of business. She had arthritis real bad. But she was a kick-ass artist. And so kids that really want to go to art college and then really apprentice under somebody that's good, they're the ones that are going to be kick-ass artists. It's that simple. You think you could do it on your own? Just because you buy a wrench don't make you a mechanic.